Alexander the Great. I mean, the name pretty much says it all, right? History calls him the Great for a reason. But who is the man behind the myth? In this explainer, we're going to dig past the legend to find the strategist, the visionary, and the force of nature who carved out one of the biggest empires the world has ever seen.
So let's just get right to it. The big question, the one that has fascinated people for centuries, is how? How on earth does a king from a kind of small, scrappy kingdom manage to topple a global superpower and build an empire stretching from Greece to India, all before his 33rd birthday?
To even begin to understand the conqueror, you gotta go back, way back. The story really starts when he was a prince, being molded and shaped by some of the most brilliant and ambitious people in the entire ancient world.
And this slide, wow, it just lays out the sheer scale of the challenge. On one side, you have Macedon, a tough place for sure, but small. And on the other side, you have the Persian Achaemenid Empire. This thing was a behemoth, a colossal superpower. So the odds? Let's just say they were not in his favor. It was a true David versus Goliath situation.
You know, how does a kid get that kind of drive? Well, his upbringing was basically a perfect storm of influences. First, you've got his dad, Philip II, an absolute military genius who turned the Macedonian army into a killing machine. Then there's his mom, Olympias, this fiercely ambitious woman who whispered in his ear that he was descended from Achilles and maybe even Zeus himself. And oh yeah, to top it all off, his personal tutor was none other than Aristotle, the Aristotle.
We get this incredible early glimpse into how his mind worked with the story of his horse, Bucephalus. So picture this. Grown men, seasoned horse trainers, they can't get anywhere near this wild stallion. But Alexander, just a kid, he notices something everyone else missed. The horse was scared to death of its own shadow. So what does he do? He just turns the horse to face the sun, and boom, he calms it down and gains a loyal companion that would carry him all the way to India. His ambition was so huge, so obvious, that even his own father knew their kingdom couldn't possibly contain him. This quote from Philip, it's not just a dad being proud. It's basically a prophecy, a warning to the rest of the world about what was about to be unleashed.
Okay, so how did all that potential turn into action? After his father is assassinated, Alexander, who's just 20 years old, takes the throne. And he doesn't wait around. He immediately launches the grand plan his father had always dreamed of, the invasion of Persia.
The pace of his conquest, which you can see here, is just staggering. I mean, think about it. In 334 BC, he crosses into Asia. Just 3 years later, after the Battle of Gaugamela, the Persian Empire is effectively shattered. And by 326, he's fighting in modern-day Pakistan at the edge of the known world. We're talking about a little over 10 years of non-stop marching and fighting. It's just incredible.
Now, this slide right here tells you everything you need to know in one simple, powerful way. Just look at that outcome column. Victory, victory, victory. The guy was undefeated in a major battle. His record was perfect. I mean, who does that? It's almost unheard of in the history of warfare. And his genius for finding a direct solution wasn't just for the battlefield. When he was faced with the legendary Gordian knot, this impossibly complex puzzle that nobody could solve, he didn't even try to untie it. He just looked at it, drew his sword, and sliced it in half. It was the perfect metaphor for his whole philosophy. Think differently, act decisively, and don't be bound by the old rules. But here's the thing. If you only focus on the battles, you're missing half the story. Alexander's vision for what came after the conquest was, in some ways, even more radical than the conquest itself. He didn't just want to rule the world, he wanted to remake it.
His grand project is something we now call Hellenization. The basic idea, as you can see here, was to spread Greek culture, the language, the ideas, the art, the philosophy, all across his new empire. He was trying to create a new, blended civilization, a cultural bridge connecting East and West that would change the world forever.
And he wasn't just a conqueror, he was a builder, a massive one. He founded over 20 cities, most of them named Alexandria, a bit of an ego maybe, stretching from Egypt to Afghanistan. And these weren't just forts, they became buzzing centers of Greek culture, commerce, and knowledge. The most famous one, in Egypt, became home to the Great Library, the intellectual capital of the ancient world.
And his plan for fusing these cultures was, for the time, absolutely wild. He started adopting Persian customs, even their style of dress. Then, get this, he organized a mass wedding where he and his top generals all married Persian noblewomen. He was literally trying to engineer a new, blended ruling class to govern his new world.
So, let's set the scene. He's 32 years old. He's the undisputed master of the known world. He's busy planning his next campaign, this time into Arabia. He seemed, for all intents and purposes, unstoppable. And then, suddenly, he wasn't.
His death in Babylon remains one of history's greatest cold cases. There was no clear explanation, and almost immediately, two competing theories popped up that people are still arguing about to this very day. As this slide shows, you've basically got two camps. On one side, the poisoning theory. And let's be real, he had powerful rivals, guys like his general Antipater, who definitely had a motive. But on the other hand, there's the natural causes argument. You have to remember, his body was an absolute wreck after years of campaigning, multiple serious wounds, and a famous love of drinking. He was vulnerable to any number of diseases, like malaria or typhoid.
With no clear air, his supposed last words were like throwing a lit match into a room full of dynamite. He allegedly left his massive empire to the strongest. What do you think happened? Absolute chaos. A brutal 40-year-long civil war broke out among his top generals, who then proceeded to rip his life's work to pieces. So the man was dead, his empire was shattered. Why on earth are we still talking about him more than 2,300 years later? Because the world he left behind was fundamentally different from the one he was born into. I mean, his legacy is almost impossible to wrap your head around. He kicked off an entire historical period, the Hellenistic Age. He connected the economies and cultures of East and West in a way no one had before. His military tactics, they're still required reading at West Point. And he became the ultimate benchmark for ambition, the guy every would-be conqueror, from Julius Caesar to Napoleon, measured themselves against. Which brings us back to the final essential question about Alexander. Who was he, really? A visionary unifier who dreamed of a blended, multicultural world, or a brilliant but ruthless conqueror, driven by an endless thirst for glory? The truth is probably somewhere in that complicated middle, and that very complexity is why we're still so fascinated by him today.